Welcome back to another episode of UTalks. I'm Dr. Clavon. I'm hosting today. And I'm joined by
Dr. Laci Coppins-Robbins, Executive Director for Urban Learning Collaborative, and I'm so excited to keep the conversations going.
Yes. Before we get going a little bit, can you tell us a little bit more about Urban Learning Collaborative?
I would be happy to. So Urban Learning Collaborative, ULC, formerly known as Milwaukee Teacher Education Center, MTEC, was founded in 1996. We actually were founded by a group of educators in partnership with Milwaukee Public Schools with the intent of being able to create a pipeline for those individuals who were paraprofessionals and who were looking to be able to become classroom teachers.
I'm actually old enough to remember that. So
I'm not.
Urban Learning, she's not, but I'm old enough to remember that. That was around my first year of teaching. And in fact, you've done some rebranding and you have a new name.
Yes.
The former name was?
Milwaukee Teacher Education Center, or MTEC.
Now light bulbs are going off all over the Milwaukee
yeah,
area, Wisconsin area.
Exactly. Yeah. And a lot of people still know us as MTEC. We typically still lead with, Urban Learning Collaborative, formerly known as MTEC. We're kind of like Twitter, without the X.
The X, yeah.
And so, this being the case, we rebranded because we wanted people to better identify who we are truly serving.
Yes.
And so we've always been about urban. We've always been about community. So let's lead with that because we are beyond Milwaukee and we are beyond just serving solely teachers. Yeah. We actually serve people who are in education period and education adjacent. So you might be a speech pathologist or a social worker or a school psychologist or a guidance counselor. These are people who aren't necessarily in front of children, a pediatrician, daily instructing them. Okay. But you very much have your fingerprint on, that next generation. Okay. And so this allowed us to do that. We also are known for our professional learning services or professional development. People also think of it that way. We actually are able to offer those opportunities nationwide. Wow. Both in person as well as virtual. And then in 2013, we opened our charter school, Milwaukee Environmental Sciences Academy, Mesa. Wow. Okay. So it's on the north side.
What a busy place.
We are busy. We are definitely busy.
What a busy place.
But, always thinking about the next generation as well as the current generation.
All right. Wonderful. And you mentioned that you serve educators and individuals who are adjacent to education. Mm-hmm. So there's a new program.
Brand new
around
program.
Leadership.
I'm so excited. This new program is called Leadership DevelopU, and applications are rolling, as well as for our teacher certification program applications. We have rolling enrollment. And part of the reason why we decided to endeavor in the leadership space more deeply is we had people who went through our program as a classroom to become a classroom teacher who now have ascended into leadership and are administrators working at like central office, working at the State Department, who came back and were like, hey, what do you have for me? What opportunity do you have? And so that led to a deeper conversation internally. And then also allowed us to start to think, well, what if we did things a little bit differently? What if we were more intentional and thinking about the next generation of leader? And so that's where Leadership DevelopU came into place.
Wonderful.
So you don't have to be a teacher to be a part of Leadership DevelopU. You just have to be an individual who is looking to fortify your leadership skills.
All right. Wonderful. And we look forward to
welcoming the next cohort.
The first cohort. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's going to be dynamic.
Well, I love it. And since the theme of this conversation is leadership, let's talk a little bit about how you, Dr. Laci, defines leadership.
Oh my goodness. So leadership, I actually have to adopt the definition from another leader that I really admire. And he says that leadership is influence. And so that's John Maxwell. A lot of people are familiar with John Maxwell. Yeah. He's known as like one of the fathers of leadership. Yes. And with leadership being influence, that's really how I quantify and identify leadership. And so I'm continuously looking at, who has the influence in the room? Because I believe like titles are rented. And so since titles are rented, leadership can take place from anyone. You lead from every seat that you sit in.
Okay.
And so this is why you can have a person in the room, a student in the room, and the whole class has gotten off, or the whole meeting now has gotten off, because this person has the influence in the room. They are, in fact, a leader, even though they may not have the same title as leader.
In fact, it makes me understand leadership as influence as you don't always have to lead with positive outcomes in mind if you're influencing, right? Yeah. We can look around us and we can look at the world around us and we can see that there are some leaders who have heavy influence, but not necessarily leading toward a positive outcome.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And as a person who is leading from every seat, you also have to be able to define for yourself, what is the positive?
Yeah.
What is the outcome you're seeking?
Yeah.
Right? Because, outcomes look very different depending on who the person is who is striving towards it.
Yeah. I like your definition because so often we think of leadership and assume it has a positive connotation. We assume that there will be positive outcomes, but that does not always have to be true, right?
It does not.
All right.
Yeah, it does not. It's just, little Johnny in the corner, or little, Susie in the corner, and you're like,
or Big Johnny and Big Susie.
Or Big Johnny and Big Susie. That's right. That's right. Clavon, who was like, what in the world? Like, come on, class, come back over here.
Right.
Let's get back on track.
Right.
And let's keep this learning going forward.
Okay.
I often think of facilitating professional development.
Yes.
And there's always one that's in the room who is trying to either take the group off, or maybe gets into or attempts to get into some sort of power struggle with you. And how do you respond to that? Right. And having the confidence in self to know how to respond.
Wow. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about your vast experience as a leader, and how. Well, first of all, can you just describe your leadership experience first?
Oh, my journey.
Yeah, what's your journey like?
Yeah, so I actually began as an elementary school teacher.
Me too.
First and third grade.
Fourth.
And then I, like yourself, got a phone call one day. So I was working in the inner city.
Could you tell it was going to be
I did
that
not know
call?
what it was going to be.
Okay.
So, I was a part of a cohort experience for my master's degree. So I have both a master's degree and a doctorate degree in leadership.
Me
and
too.
My doctoral research is specifically in neuroscience.
Okay. Not me too.
And so in alignment with metacognitive theory. And so one of the classmates, he was working in the suburbs and gave me a call, was like, hey, you think you'd be interested in administration? And at the time, I just, I had my master's. I hadn't started the doctoral program yet. And I thought, well, why not? That's part of the reason why you go to get your master's degree. Not just about getting more dollars, but what is the next level? Right. And so I hemmed and hawed. And then I got a call from the HR director, and he looked like us.
Wow.
And so
they were moving fast.
Yeah. And I was like, well, maybe I should do this.
They knew what they wanted.
Well, apparently. And so I interviewed, became the assistant principal in the building.
How old were you at this point?
26. Actually, I wasn't even 26. I was 25.
Beat me out. I was 29.
Yeah, I was 25 when I became an assistant principal. And in my mind, I thought, okay, I'll probably be in this role 5, 7, maybe even 10 years. No big deal.
That's the way we thought about it.
That's the way we thought. Yeah. And the superintendent at the time, he kept saying, I'm going to fast track you. I'm going to fast track you. And I was like, okay. So in my mind, 5, 7, 10 years,
No, 5 years, right.
Yeah, fast track me. So by that February, which is why I was still 25 technically, because my birthday's not till March. Okay. I was called in and was like, hey, we're going to make you into the principal of this building. And the principal who was there went to another building because the principal who was the building that she went to was going to open a brand new school.
The Dominoes,
right? Kind of shell game. And I thought to myself, wow, what an amazing
That's how it happens.
new opportunity for my inexperienced self to become a principal.
Absolutely.
Now, the blessing, I felt like both my mom was a principal, my grandmother had been in education, so I'm from a long line of preachers, teachers, and servicemen, so I felt like I had that kind of push behind me, so I could do this, I could figure this out, I can learn anything. You set this opportunity before me, I'm going to be successful. It's just how, a matter of when, right?
Okay.
And so I took the job. And became the principal in the same building where I had served as assistant principal.
Wow.
So that came with its own level of challenges.
Yes, it does. Mm-hmm. Those people know you.
Yes, so they thought. And, and it was interesting because there were perceptions that the previous administrator had favorites and, this was her go-to team. And, there was also that same perception that I now had that same action-oriented philosophy. Yeah. And I think some of it really is, and it boiled down to culture.
Yep.
And how the culture had been established. So they, you naturally think, oh, well, we're just going to keep the party going and this is how things happen.
Okay.
The dynamics, though, to go from predominantly African-American, school students, parents, educators, to now I was one of 3 people of color in the building, one being the custodian. And I'll never forget my first day waiting there as assistant principal, waiting in the hallway, welcoming families, and a parent walked up to me and she said, "Oh, are you the new guidance counselor?" I was like, this is interesting.
That's funny.
No, I'm the new assistant principal.
That's funny.
Yeah, and very much an affluent community. Mm-hmm. I had parents who, professional athletes and child actors and musicians. And so that also came with its own set of experience.
Expectations.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you leave that opportunity and you go where?
So I quit my job. I literally had a student attempt to stab me with a hunting knife.
Okay, that's a good reason to quit. Note to self, that's a good reason to quit.
Good reason to quit in the suburbs. So at this point,
happens. Oh yeah, that happens. You just don't hear about it.
Just don't hear about it. Yeah. Working in the working on my doctorate, worked for about another year, and really just made that decision like, I don't think I want to do this anymore. And so that last year of finishing school and just kind of floating basically through that last year. Looking back, I realized I probably had PTSD.
Yes.
And I moved after 13 years in the same field, moved to Europe, moved to Florence, Italy, had my own little eat, pray, love experience.
Okay, so, one day you're an elementary school administrator. Mm-hmm. An event occurs, and another day, shortly after, you're living in Italy.
Just like that.
And how long did you live there?
I lived there for about a year, working for an English-speaking newspaper, studying art, eating my way across Europe. Okay. Seeing Tina Turner live at the O in London.
Living your best life.
Living my best life. Paris for New Year's Eve. I mean, living my best life.
Living your best life.
It was amazing. Wow. Absolutely amazing.
Wow.
And, your family, they'll guilt you.
Oh, they got to get you back.
Absolutely.
So I'm reading the mind of our friends who are watching us right now, and they're saying, let's hear Dr. Laci speak some Italian.
Buonasera, ragazzi.
Okay, there we go. All right. Now that we got that taken care of, and ultimately, you had other experiences, and now you're the executive director over here at Urban Learning Collaborative. So let's talk a little bit about some leadership trip-ups, or one leadership trip-up that you had, and a leadership triumph. Yeah. So let's start with the trip-up. Where along your leadership journey did you have a moment where you just didn't do as well as you had hoped to or expected to?
Oh, my goodness. I feel like, reflecting on this question, there have been different instances in which you are your own worst enemy. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And so, and it's powerful when you have a leader that's in place who can help get you on the right track. But when you don't have a leader in place,
spiral.
You can really spiral, right?
Yeah.
And so prior to accepting this position, I had a totally different thing in mind, but I feel compelled to share this. I was working in a role where I was like the number 2 in command, had lots of responsibilities, writing curriculum, going out in the community, representing the organization, so on and so forth. And those were very much my duties. This was for another education nonprofit. And my colleague, their whole sole responsibility was to be writing and soliciting funds to help the organization to run.
Okay.
The challenge became, as if anyone who's ever applied for grants before, you make the application, you receive the funds, and then there's some sort of report that they're looking like, how was the money spent? Outcomes,
metrics,
and you have to be ready to submit and share those things because you want to be able to maybe get funded again, right?
Yeah.
And so what was happening was I was being invited to basically write the report for the other colleague.
Okay.
Now, I don't mind. I'm a team player, so I don't mind like, here, let me give you, the information to help you in this. But then you give it back to me and you basically ask me to like write it for you because you're so busy. You have other things you're trying to get the next grant out the door. Fine, no problem. Again, I want us all to win.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
so I do it and then I do it again. And now you are trying to create a pattern that I do your work for you.
Okay.
This became a problem for me.
Okay.
And so now I'm to the point where it's like, I'm just going to give you the bullet points and you write the narrative. I shouldn't have to write the narrative. So a moment I'm not very proud of basically turned into a verbal altercation.
Okay.
Because
it had been building.
It had been building.
Yeah.
It was it's almost kind of like a powder keg, right? You put so much pressure on a person and then boom, kaboom, there it is, right? Don't put baby in the corner. And so there it is. And I just kind of went off. And I was just like, I'm not going to keep doing your work for you.
Wow.
It may have not been at this tone. But I just let her know, like, I'm not going to keep doing this, and you can start to do your work for yourself.
Okay.
Well, needless to say, that created quite a tense working space.
I imagine.
Especially because now you're going to run and tell the supervisor, tell the president on me that I'm not helping you to do your work.
Right.
So then that led to a whole nother experience with that supervisor. And so, and me basically letting the supervisor know, why should I do her work? My understanding, this is my job description, that's not in it. Right.
I really think your story is resonating with a lot of people who are out here watching this episode, because this sort of behavior occurs in organizations quite a bit.
Oh, yeah.
So that they don't have that powder keg moment.
Right. Because I'm not proud of the
That's
moment.
not what we want for you guys,
right? That was definitely a trip up.
No, it's a trip up. We don't want that for you guys. It worked out for Dr. Laci, but we don't want that for you.
Right.
What advice would you give them when they start to feel like others are pushing their work territory upon them? What advice? How do you get out of a situation like that?
So you definitely have to set the boundaries, right? And, where I probably should have acted differently was from the very first instance.
Yes.
The very first moment I said, oh, sure, I'll take it on, and then completed it, I was setting myself up for failure.
Yeah.
And so, I have to take that ownership. I can't change how she acted, their response. I can only adjust my response. What's my circle of influence,
really
right?
Good. Yeah.
And so that would be my first advice, is like, know what your boundaries are and maintain those boundaries. So if it means like, I don't take phone calls, after a certain hour from a supervisor, or I don't work on the weekends, or, for some people, they might have multiple phones because that's a part of their role. Well, if part of your agreement that you have in your household is that you don't take calls from the office on the weekend, then you need to make sure people know that that is how you operate as well. Because it's also not fair to them then that you're just ignoring the call, right?
Communicate that expectation.
Communicate the expectation. And so if that was indeed the expectation that I should have been doing this work, or we should have been doing it together, then that should have been communicated from the supervisor from the beginning, and it was not. I think another thing I had to come to the realization, and I would also encourage our listeners to think about, and people who are being a part of this conversation, is I had to also know when it was time to move on. When was it time to move on? And when I made that determination, like when I was in the parking lot, not wanting to go in, on the phone with my husband, like, do I have to go today?
Right.
Are you sure? Can't we figure this out? I think we could do something else.
Right.
And, I knew it was time. I knew it was time.
Yeah.
And no money is good money like that you're my gosh, I got it. Like even when I left being a principal, it was time.
It was time.
I knew it was time. And, my family, of course, was like, I wish you would have talked with us. Like, how are you quitting your job and moving to Europe? Like literally what happened was I quit my job. The next weekend I graduated with my doctorate. And then I told my family I was moving to Europe.
Wow.
All in the same
just like that.
Scope of 2 weeks, yes.
Wow.
Yes, and I will say, I knew in April that it was time. It was spring break. I was on a long run, and I just felt God saying, like, you are released from this assignment.
Wow.
And I wouldn't finish until like June 30th, to close out the school year and everything, and finish with the doctorate and all that. But it was like, when I made that decision, and I had the letter of resignation ready.
Weight off your shoulder.
What? I was like, I can breathe.
Wow.
And so same thing with, that other role too.
Okay.
And just knowing it was time to go.
Okay.
And because this cycle was going to continue.
It's going to continue.
And I don't do well in toxic environments. I don't know too many people who thrive in toxic environments.
No.
And so just knowing, really knowing myself too, I have a professional reputation to protect. And so I can't go around, we already are dealing with the stereotypes of the angry Black woman and all of this. I can't keep going around.
Yeah, you can't perpetuate that.
Right.
Okay. So that was a trip up. Can you tell us about one of the many triumphs that you had, and what did you learn from it?
So I would say one triumph is going back to when I was a school principal.
Okay.
And I remember I had submitted the resignation, and it was like, some of my last days, and I'm at central office, turning in keys, turning in IDs, saying goodbye. And I walked into the director, the chief education officer, to her office, and she literally had tears in her eyes. And I was like, are you okay? I just come to say goodbye. She's like, are you sure you want to leave?
Wow.
And I said, yeah.
You made an impact.
I said, my season has come to an end. She said, I literally just looked at your test scores, and I looked at the impact that you've had with this school.
Wow.
Because we were already like a high performing, doing well school, but there was still room for growth.
Absolutely.
And in the season I had been there, I was a principal there for 6 years. We had numerous experiences of professional development, very intentional, had a chance to visit Manhattan New School, studied the work of Laci Coppins. Just like really had moved our school to be a model for literacy in the district. Had people coming from within the district to see how we were operating, and
enjoying success.
Oh my gosh, enjoying success. And the K through 2 team was just like high flyers, because that was the foundation that was being set, and how they were educating and such. And she just really was sad to see me go because of the work we had done together. Mm-hmm. And so in that moment, as I was leaving her office, it really made me reflect like, wow, I was a part of that.
Right.
I was a part of that.
Not a key part of it.
Did it all,
right?
But I was a part of that. And I think sometimes we don't take the time to celebrate. We don't take the time to accomplish, to take a moment to look at our accomplishments and to reflect upon them, because we're on to the next thing. We're on to the next work. We're on to the next big task. And because we're always like forward facing, like what's next, future oriented and minded, we don't take the time to think about the now and this moment.
Absolutely.
And so leaving her office forced me into that space of like, wow, that was good. Those were great 6 years in spite of the ebbs and the flows. Right. It was still good.
Have you taken that lesson with you throughout your leadership experiences since then?
I would say I have. I've definitely done better and worse, and depending on the circumstance, depending on what's happening. Because sometimes the work is still going. But I would say, I try my best to be more intentional in the moments of celebration.
Okay.
And so even so much of like getting other team members like, okay, let's pause. Like, this is just not an agenda topic on the meeting today. Let's pause and let's celebrate that. How do we want to celebrate it? Do we all, let's take the team to lunch, or let's bring lunch in, or, let's acknowledge it in an email or video to the whole organization, not just solely, always celebrating with food, but
celebrate the wins.
Celebrate the bonuses. Like, how can we celebrate
tangible
ways to celebrate these wins as well?
I love it. Your stories are very inspiring. And out there in the audience, if Dr. Laci's stories inspired you, whether it was her triumph or her trip up or her leadership journey, we invite you to join the next cohort of Leadership DevelopU.
Absolutely.
And where can they get the application?
So you can definitely learn more by visiting urban-learning.org. You can also find information down in the caption below. And, again, we are excited to welcome our next series of applicants for not only the Leadership DevelopU program, but also for our teacher certification program. And you may even have a little that you'd like to be a part of the Milwaukee Environmental Sciences Academy. And there are ways to apply there, and those will be listed below as well.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Laci.
My pleasure.
Thank you for joining us today. And don't forget, leadership begins with you. Are you looking to take the next step in leadership? Are you looking to grow as a leader? If so, I have the perfect program for you. Leadership DevelopU, sponsored by Urban Learning Collaborative, is now accepting applications for its first cohort of leadership development programming. You can find the application and apply at urban-learning.org. Again, that's www.urban-learning.org. We look forward to seeing you in that next cohort.